So it's time to have the interesting conversation about whether or not we should primary Biden from the left. Look at this piece from Politico here. Progressives were frustrated with President Joe Biden even before Senator Joe Manchin knifed the Build Back Better Act on live television Sunday. Voting rights legislation appears to be going nowhere. Student loan collection is expected to restart early next year. Some of the Trump administration's border policies remain in effect. And the $6 trillion social spending and climate action bill Democrats had once envisioned had already been whittled down to less than $2 trillion over a decade, leaving many progressive priorities on the cutting room table. Now, with the sting of this latest Build Back Better setback still fresh, progressive lawmakers and activists are openly venting about the White House, and some are even entertaining the idea of a primary challenge to Biden in 2024. If he stands by his plans to run for re-election. Asked if she thought there'd be such a challenge, former state senator Nina Turner, a close ally of Bernie Sanders, told West Wing Playbook, quote, "Without a doubt, I think the movement is going to cry out for that," she said. "We played nice in 2020, we played nice in 2021, and what do we get for it?" Asked if she would consider challenging Biden, Turner declined to comment. So, understand something. I'm on record, and I've said this repeatedly over the decade of me doing this show. I'm on record of saying primary challenges to sitting presidents never work. Ever. You're not going to win even the most unpopular sitting president for a current party because of raw partisanship. They will always win out. So in other words, even though Biden's approval rating, depending on which poll you look at, ranges from anywhere from 38% to 45%, within the Democratic Party, he polls at 80%. Even given all of his failures, even given all the weakness, even given the fact they haven't lifted a finger since the $1,400 checks. That's what you need to understand. He's at 80% among the Democratic base. Now, that's relatively low, historically speaking. Trump did have over a 90% approval rating, probably still does within the Republican Party, but that's still 80%. It's still high among the people who will actually vote in a Democratic primary. So I don't want anybody to be under any illusions here of like, oh, there's a chance. There's not a chance. There's just not. I'm sorry. I don't want to be the bringer of bad news. Bringer of bad news? Bearer of bad news? Whatever the phrase is. But there's not a chance. Now, having said that, should Joe Biden be primaried anyway? Yes, he should. Why do I say that? I say that because we have this problem in the U.S. where the Overton window keeps shifting further and further and further right. And so Republicans go off to Cuckooville, and then Democrats shift further right and meet them halfway to Cuckooville, so Democrats are proudly half cuckoo. And every election cycle, that repeats. Every election cycle. And the Democrats think we're reasonable centrist moderates, but it's like, actually, you are just a Republican from 1982 at this point. So something needs to be done to break the fever and shift the conversation. And one of the ways to do that is a high-profile primary against Biden in 2024. Now, don't tell me, well, that's going to hurt Biden in a potential re-election campaign. Total bullshit. The Republicans in 2016 had the most vicious primary you could ever imagine. Donald Trump saying Ted Cruz's dad killed JFK. People talking about other people's wives. I wouldn't spill the beans on her. Debates where they bring up dick size. They're at each other's throats. It was vicious. And then Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016. Don't tell me that a robust, argumentative primary cycle hurts the candidate because there is zero evidence to back up that claim. None. And that's exactly what corporate media will tell you. Corporate media is wrong, and they're very wrong about this. So what do you do to shift the conversation? What do you do to let everybody know there's another perspective out there? You primary Biden from the left. I wouldn't even frame it, by the way, as primarying Biden from the left. I wouldn't do that. I would take a candidate like a Nina Turner, run her against Biden, and I'd have Nina go out there, advocate all the policy stuff she already advocates for, Medicare for all, free college, living wage, end the war, so on and so forth, all that stuff. But I'd have her go out there and say, actually, I'm the moderate. I'm the centrist. Joe Biden's the extremist, and Donald Trump is the extremist. These people are way far to the right of the American people. He couldn't even get Build Back Better done when the goddamn bill polls at like 80%. I'm the person who will actually get the 80% bill through. And I'll also break out that executive order pen, eliminate student loan debt, legalize marijuana, and do the things that the American people want, because my job is not to tell you my opinions and force them on the country. My job is to be a vessel, a medium for your opinions, the American people. So I'm the candidate who actually represents the will of the people in this country, and I'm the candidate who's just the medium for the voiceless. That's what I do. I don't listen to corporate donors. I don't listen to billionaires. I listen to you, the American people. And therefore, the best label to put on me is moderate. I'm the real moderate. Joe Biden is not a moderate. That's what you do. But what you can do is put the issues front and center. Now, look, I will say the other downside of this is, which is maybe why Nina shouldn't be the one to do it. We could have that conversation. But whoever does primary Biden would be cast out as a total pariah moving forward in the Democratic Party. So that means when there's a 2028 campaign or whatever, fast forward to the future, if you're the person who primaries Biden, they'll say, oh, you're not sufficiently loyal to Democrats. And that argument will work. You know, it was one of the things that Bernie had to struggle with when he ran in 2016 and 2020, is that in 2012, he openly floated this idea that maybe I'll primary Obama. And that was used effectively against him by the establishment, where it was portrayed as, you're not sufficiently a party person, you're not really a Democrat. And even though that argument to me and you, we roll our eyes, if anything, we're like, good, you're not really a Democrat. But to actual Democrats in a primary who are voting in a Democratic primary, that's an effective argument, and they don't like that. So it is, in a way, it is sort of career suicide to do it. But at the same time, it is so necessary because you can force the conversations we need to have into the body politic, because they'll be forced to cover you. If you're primarying Biden from the left and you're the only person who's running against Biden, the media won't be able to help themselves, because one of their biases that we rarely talk about, but it's a real bias that they have, is a sensationalism bias. So if you have somebody breathing fire from Biden's left, that can have an impact. Now, the other thing is what? If it's a sufficiently credible challenger, in the sense that maybe they'll rack up 15 or 20% of the Democratic primary vote, that then forces Biden's hand to try to do the come together kumbaya moment. And it may actually force him to be slightly further to the left. Now, I'm under no illusions about how Joe Biden governs and about all of his flaws. But this is also the guy who pulled out of Afghanistan. Granted, he's now literally starving Afghanistan through sanctions. So, I mean, talk about, cold comfort and tiny credit here that he pulled out of Afghanistan. But he also raised the minimum wage for federal employees and federal contractors to $15 an hour. He also did cut those $1,400 checks. But point is, he's going to go where the sentiment forces him. And the voices that are in his ear 24/7 in Washington, D.C. are, the reason you're down in the polls is because you're too extreme, you're too progressive. If we can send a message that actually, no, it's the opposite. The reason why you're not doing well in the polls is because you're not lefty enough, well, then that could incentivize him to, on a handful of issues, go further left and feel like he has to sort of appease this very angry wing of his own party and his base. So there are a number of upsides to primarying Biden from the left, and there are a number of downsides to primarying Biden from the left, but I think it's necessary to force the national conversation where it needs to be. Namely, the media is wrong and corporate Democrats are wrong. The problem isn't that Biden is too idealistic, pie in the sky, and far-reaching with his ideology. It's that he's too corporate and he's too corrupt and he's too willing to go along with the status quo. And so just imagine a charismatic, likable, fire-breathing lefty who doesn't even call themselves a lefty. They call themselves a moderate. And they can generate headlines. They could stick to policy and push hard from the left. Even though that person would get crucified in the media, even though that person has no chance of winning, it might actually force the conversations to happen that need to happen around student loan debt elimination, around legalizing marijuana, around cutting another stimulus check, around a whole plethora of issues. So I think it's the right move, even though ultimately that person wouldn't win. But the left needs to reassert themselves because they've been so toothless and so pathetic for so long. We need to awaken lefties to know the only option isn't to be toothless. You could also be crusading for the right things. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.